Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, another drought on the other side of the world, forcing people to slash their water use in half. As California considers drastic measures, the water lessons from down under.
Defendants have the right to represent themselves in court and to cross-examine witnesses. Now, a new proposed law would stop them from questioning some victims in court. I'm Peggy Pico with Victim versus Defendant Rights. Then, what a new, smaller version of the One Paseo project will look like and the next steps for the development plan.
Saying hello to the perfect match, soldiers and farms. The San Diego Coalition helping their business grow. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. A new study says California could take some drought lessons from Australia, where the city of Melbourne cut its water consumption in half during a recent drought. KPBS Science reporter David Wagner joins us with some lessons learned from halfway around the world.
By 2010, toward the end of a drought that lasted more than a decade, residents of Melbourne were using just an average of 41 gallons per day. Compare that to Californians, who are currently averaging about 109 gallons daily. So how did Melbourne do it, and what can California learn from them? In a study published today, UC Irvine professor Stanley Grant and his colleagues highlight a few of the lessons California could take away from Australia's drought. Lesson 1, centralize the water system. California distributes water through a fragmented patchwork of local water districts, and when faced with drought, some prove better at conservation than others. In contrast, Grant says Melbourne benefited from a centralized water system that could craft uniform water restrictions and provide clear-cut rebates to all residents. Lesson 2, capture more rainwater. By the end of the drought, 1 in 3 Melbourne households had installed a rain barrel to catch water flowing off their roofs. Residents used that water on their gardens, in their flush toilets, saving precious potable water in the process. And lesson 3, don't rely on desalination. We've been following the construction of a giant water desalination plant here in Carlsbad. Australia was also in the middle of building their own desalination project back when drought struck them. But Grant says in Melbourne, residents were able to slash consumption in half before that plant ever came online. The lesson for California, he says, is we shouldn't wait for the Carlsbad plant to save our water woes when we could start saving today.
We have relied on technology to address all of our water needs. We need to ask ourselves whether we could have done better by just simply looking inwardly in our home and assessing how we could change how we consume water.
Grant admits that what worked for Australia won't necessarily work exactly the same way for California, but he says we could stand to save a lot of water by taking their lead. David Wagner, KPBS News.
A major water wholesaler that serves 19 million people, including customers here in San Diego, approved a huge funding boost for its Cash for Grass program. Today's vote by Metropolitan Water District adds $350 million to pay people to replace lawns with low water alternatives. Homeowners and businesses have rushed to request rebates after Governor Brown ordered mandatory water cutbacks. The LA Times says 3 members from the San Diego County Water Authority opposed the funding increase. They argued the program was unsustainable. New studies show backyard pools may help save water. Pool builders claim they use less water than traditional landscapes. They point to studies from water districts showing landscapes use more than 200,000 gallons of water during a 5-year period, while a covered pool only uses about 70,000 gallons during the same time.
So when compared to a lawn, which is typically what we remove is lawn, this yard will now, where the pool and decking are, will use about 1/3 of the water that a lawn would use.
Californians built more backyard swimming pools last year than any time since the peak of the housing boom. Still on hold, the president's executive order to shield millions of people who are in the country illegally from deportation. Today, a federal appeals court refused to lift a temporary hold on the order. A Texas judge blocked the plan back in February after 26 states filed a lawsuit. They claimed the order was unconstitutional. California's Attorney General joined 14 states calling for the executive order to move forward. The Justice Department is evaluating next steps after today's ruling. A San Diego lawmaker wants to protect victims' rights in the courtroom. But as Peggy Pico finds out, the proposal may run into some constitutional changes or challenges.
The U.S. Constitution allows criminal defendants to act as their own attorney in a court of law. They're also allowed to question their accusers on the witness stand. But Senate Bill 603 by State Senator Ben Hueso would prohibit a defendant who represents themselves from cross-examining victims in certain cases. San Diego Deputy District Attorney Judy Tashner joins us with details. And Judy, the San Diego District Attorney's Office actually backs this bill. What would SB 603 change?
Well, it would provide a protection that is not currently in place to protect the most vulnerable of victims in the courtroom from being directly questioned by their attacker. It would apply to the most sensitive of cases: felony domestic violence, felony sex crimes, felony child abuse, felony elder abuse, and felony stalking.
So when you say their attacker, this is actually the defendant who is who is being accused of this. Why do you think this bill is necessary? Are there a lot of defendants who represent themselves in these types of cases?
It doesn't happen in a large percentage of cases. It's a pretty small percentage of cases where a defendant chooses to represent himself. But when it does happen, and in these particular cases, it can be horrendous. And so we are trying to protect them in the most serious of cases.
And has that happened in a case that you've prosecuted where you've seen somebody representing themselves, cross-examining the victim?
Yes, I mean, two cases recently come to mind. One was a stalking case, and where she had to answer questions directly from her stalker, and another was a rape case that occurred here in San Diego, where our rape victim had to answer questions directly from the man who eventually was convicted of committing a really violent rape upon her. And he was representing himself, and she had no other option, despite the fact that she was having panic attacks and was having to go to the emergency room before the trial.
What kind of, I was going to say, what kind of impact? That's impacts on the victim, of course. What about on the court? What about on the jury?
Well, juries have to sit and listen to this, listen to the accused directly question the person who supposedly they raped or molested or stalked, and I would think that could be pretty emotional and uncomfortable.
Well, the ACLU opposes this bill. Earlier today, they told us this by phone.
The U.S. Constitution guarantees to every person the right to represent himself or herself, and it also guarantees the right to effective cross-examination. And the procedure proposed here of bringing in an attorney who is not involved in the case to read a list of prepared questions is not effective cross-examination. And so while we understand the good intentions here, this procedure is simply not consistent with the Constitution. So
what is your response, Judy, to the constitutional rights of a criminal defendant to cross-examine their witness?
Yes, it is being opposed by the ACLU, and we've had this discussion during a Senate hearing, and I'm aware of their discussions, their arguments that saying that this is it's going to violate the constitutional rights. But we've researched this. We have pulled case law from other jurisdictions where this has been upheld, this exact procedure. Our own Supreme Court has said that if you have a compelling state interest, it can outweigh a defendant's rights in some cases.
What about the idea that if you do not allow the defendant to ask the questions, to cross-examine on a court of law, that you're implying that defendant is guilty before the jury?
He still remains innocent until proven guilty, and that's going to be up to the jury to decide. This is simply another criminal procedure to put in place, and the jury will be told you're not to use this against him. It's a criminal procedure that the judge is putting in place.
Yeah, and under SB 603, who would then question the witness if it wasn't the defendant?
If the judge finds that having this defendant directly question this particular victim would cause that victim further trauma, the judge could call up a standby counsel who would come down and read that defendant's questions. The defendant would still get all of his questions asked, he would still maintain control of his case, and he would still get to have all of his questions asked through the standby counsel.
Are there any safeguards right now in place for the victims in either other states or other jurisdictions?
Nobody has this law as far as what we've been able to find, but other jurisdictions have case law that has upheld it. And in cases that haven't been upheld, they essentially stated that the judge didn't make the correct factual findings first. And so that's why we think this bill is so important, because we've looked at all the cases and what they've said, and we've got the correct procedure in place to make sure everyone's rights are protected, the vulnerable victims' rights as well as the defendant's rights.
All right, San Diego Deputy District Attorney Judy Tashner will be following up on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Disabled children need specialized care. That's the conclusion of a new grand jury report from San Diego County. It recommends creating separate adult and child units for the in-home supportive services program. Right now, social workers handle both. The report says the program would improve if social workers were allowed to specialize. Murphy Canyon off Interstate 15 is a major military housing area in San Diego. It also has the largest concentration of children in the county. That's why a new child development center is opening to serve Navy families.
1, 2, 3. Yay!
It took a year and a half to build the new Murphy Canyon Child Development Center, the second of two in this area, serving San Diego's 3 naval bases. A huge video display greets visitors at the entrance, where you can see every playroom in this 1,300-square-foot facility. Families and military personnel took a tour, and teachers even sang a song with help from some puppets.
Good morning, boys and girls. Hi, ho, the Cheerios. Good morning, boys and girls.
The commanding officer of Naval Base San Diego says it's a critical service for those who serve this country to know their children are safe.
So what we do here inside of these walls, how we help those children mature, learn, give them a safe environment, and then so that the parents can come home and focus during the day on what they're supposed to be doing, be deployed, whatever it is they're doing. Absolutely irreplaceable.
The county director of Health and Human Services says about 1 million people, or a third of San Diego's population, are tied to the military. So this center is a vital link.
90% of a child's brain develops in the first 5 years. If we're talking about who our future men and women and serve in this country, both in the armed forces and the rest of the nation, we have to do right for our children.
First Five San Diego donated more than $6 million to build the new center. It will serve kids between the ages of 3 and 5. The waiting list, by the way, was filled almost immediately. The center will serve up to 114 children. There are signs tonight of relief at the gas pump. The cost to fill up is finally going down in San Diego. The average price now $3.91. This marks the 9th time for a price drop in 10 days. The price is still 50 cents above, or rather more than a month ago. AAA says it looks like supply issues have been resolved, which may be behind the price change. Some call it the new Wild West. The number of stem cell clinics is surging in California and the U.S. While there are high hopes the cells may lead to major medical advances, Associated Press reporter Matt Friedman explains there are critics who say there's little evidence the treatments work.
So the plastic surgeons were the first ones to really get on board.
A largely unproven but potentially promising therapy is taking root at this clinic in Beverly Hills and across the nation. As more and more doctors offer patients suffering a variety of ailments what they say is a chance to heal themselves using their own adult stem cells.
And then basically all we do is remove all the debris, wash out the collagenase, and when we're done we have 5 to 10 milliliters, like 2 teaspoons of a soup. and then we will inject that soup into the joint or even intravenously.
The adult stem cells used by Berman and other doctors can be harvested from bone marrow, fat, and other parts of the body.
These cells are separated, so look, the fat's gone to the top, and now all the cells are in the bottom.
While this procedure is intended to treat osteoarthritis, Berman and more than 100 doctors in his network use the same approach for more than 24 diseases, including Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and muscular dystrophy, at a starting cost of about $9,000. But does it work? Is it safe? And is it regulated? The answers appear open to debate.
Regulatory authorities haven't really caught up with the growth of these clinics over the last few years.
Paul Knopfler is a professor and stem cell researcher at the UC Davis School of Medicine. He says the FDA needs to keep tabs on the for-profit stem cell clinics to make sure they're not taking advantage of vulnerable patients or doing more harm than good.
The stem cell technology is really exciting, and it's kind of this cutting-edge 21st century technology, but the way it's being implemented at these clinics and how it's regulated, it's more like 19th century. It's sort of like this Wild West, you know.
You have to realize everything that we're giving the patient back is already in their body.
Dr. Berman says the stem cells will hone in on parts of the body that are injured and need repair. When it works, he says, a patient's own fat yields what he calls liquid magic or liquid gold. In 2010, there were only a handful of doctors promoting stem cell procedures in the U.S., mainly cosmetic surgeons clustered around Miami and Los Angeles. But today, an investigation by the Associated Press finds there are more than 170 clinics throughout the country promoting stem cells for everything from Alzheimer's and arthritis to diabetes and hair loss. The nation's largest stem cell chains say they have never had any serious complications, but injecting stem cells may carry life-threatening risks. The FDA declined to comment on the stem cell business for this story, but said in a statement in part, FDA takes violations of the regulations seriously and routinely follows up on entities producing products that potentially violate FDA regulations. Dr. Berman contends he doesn't need to get, nor does the FDA want to give formal approval for his procedure, and that nobody is being forced to try it.
Are we helping people or hurting people? And the truth is, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, we're really just helping people.
Critics say it's way too early to know for sure, and that more oversight is needed to keep the burgeoning and largely unregulated stem cell market on the right side of medical history. Matt Friedman, Associated Press.
A controversial bill is making its way through the state legislature. If passed, it would require pregnancy centers to let women know about abortion options and disclose if they lack medical licenses. Supporters say it protects women from misinformation. Conservative lawmakers say the bill is unconstitutional. It now heads to the state Senate. Moving forward with a new development in Carmel Valley, a new compromise calls for a smaller version of the One Paseo project we've been telling you about. From the building heights to the property size, Peggy Pico finds out what's next for the developers and neighbors.
A scaled-down version of the One Paseo mixed-use project will be built on a lot in Carmel Valley that sits between El Camino Real, Del Mar Heights Road, and High Bluff Drive. Joining me with how the project will move forward are my guest, Rachel Lang, with the project developer, Kilroy Realty, and Ken Ferinsky with What Price Main Street, a community group against the original plan for the development. And Rachel, how will this new development plan that was agreed to compare to the last version?
Right, so our compromise with the community set forth parameters, and some of the parameters include no building height over 7 stories, no, they want to cut the daily trips approximately in half, and remove one of the driveways that would have been added. So there would have been 2 driveways, they're cutting it down to 1. From there, we're going to back into those parameters and redesign the project, but we're going to do it with significant community input.
And Ken, what would you like to see in this plan? Obviously, this plan was agreed to with the community. Would you like to see other changes, or do you like it?
Well, I think we're in a great start. I think, we have reduced traffic, we have reduced heights, and we have it coming back to the planning board for community input. I think that's a great start, and I think we need to work together to try to create something that works for both of us and reduces the impacts on the community and allows them to develop the project they need.
Well, we're seeing this earlier concept of One Paseo. And Rachel, how will the final development plan address concerns of traffic and the number of high-density homes, which were of great concern to the community?
Well, so there's a formula for what creates a certain amount of traffic, right? So we'll basically have the mix of uses add up to that number. But what we'll also do is it'll still have a balanced mix of uses. So there will still be homes, there will still be retail, and there will still be office. It'll still be an active environment. It'll be different than the original project. It's not going to be, the same Main Street project that it was that the council approved, but it'll be a great project, and it'll be a highly amenitized office and living environment.
So would you say different in that it's smaller?
It will be smaller. There's no question on that, and it will. I'm not. We don't know what the mix of uses will be. There will be community input before the final project or a project redesign is brought to the public, but it'll be smaller, but it'll be mixed use.
So Ken, so much of the new plan is still going to be developed, as you both have mentioned. How do you know that the community and groups like yours will support the new plan?
We don't know yet, but the idea is to work with the community planning board to create a project we can support. And there were some issues. There were heights along the street. There were the number of intersections along Delmar Heights Road. There were the taking of mature trees, emergency response time, a number of things like that. And we need to work together. The community has worn out after 6 or 7 years, and I think Kilroy is worn out after 6 and 7 years. So we all want to create a project that works for both of us.
Well, let's go with that. It's been about 6 years, I think, really, over this as far as this debate. Will this compromise plan keep the project from further litigation or off the ballot? And let's start with you, Rachel.
Well, the idea is that it would, yes, that we will have community involvement and agreement. We had community involvement last time, and we had plenty of supporters. However, this time we're going to make sure that everybody who formally opposed it agrees on what the ideas in it and participates in it this time. Hopefully there will be more participation at the front end by some of the folks who oppose it.
So let me ask the same question to Ken. Do you think this will, as you're moving forward, this will stop any litigation and keep it off the ballot?
Well, I see a spirit of cooperation that I haven't seen before, and I think that's great. And I think the City Council is primed to require sort of community support. So with that, I think we can work something that the community supports and we push to City Council, and we don't need to go through all the litigation.
All right. And Rachel, when do you expect to break ground, if approved, this plan? What are the next steps?
What we hope is, we'll redesign the project with community input over the next couple of months, bring it back through the Community Planning Board, the Planning Commission, and City Council. We hope to have that go on a fast enough track that we can be in front of council by fall, and then that would mean, in the next 18 months we could actually be breaking ground on a project.
All right, we'll continue to follow this. Yes. Rachel Lang and Ken Ferensky, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next NewsHour. Contemporary art made in Vietnam, a developing market, and the American gallery owner behind it. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
A booming business for military veterans down on a Murrieta farm. That's where chickens and pigs are chowing down on lush green grass. It's all thanks to the Farmer Veteran Coalition. The program helps vets become farmers.
My name's Paul Grieve. I'm one of the owners of Primal Pastures. We're a family-owned pasture-based livestock farm. So we raise chickens, cows, pigs, and sheep all outside on grass in their natural environment. We're out here in Murrieta today, and I'm going to show you around the farm. I had no plan on ever farming. I grew up downtown Seattle and served in the Marine Corps as an intelligence officer from 2007 to 2011. I spent some time stateside, and then I did a deployment to Iraq in 2009. I actually bought 50 chicks along with my family. We put them outside on grass just because we wanted to eat animals a certain way that we didn't see available on the market at the time. So with no plan to ever sell any of them, we started with the 50 chicks, and to our surprise, sold all 50 of them that first time. So we did 100 the next month, then 200, then 500, then 1,000. Whoa, he's sitting there. Farmer Veteran Coalition has been a huge blessing for us on our farm. One of the very first things that they did was gave us a grant for $5,000 to get some basic first time starting out farm equipment. One of the things you can actually see right back here is our drought-friendly irrigation system. And then they also come alongside you with mentors, with people that have been in the industry for a long time, folks that have used these sprinklers time and time again that can give you the best advice on how to do it. So it's not just money, it's much, much more than that. Vets are perfect for farming because we learn a lot of the same skills that are required in the military as you need on a farm. So stuff like determination, overcoming with minimal tools and not the right equipment, sticking to something even though it's maybe tough or maybe running into issues. That's perfect stuff for entrepreneurship and for farming. So I think folks with that background, even if you don't have a farming background, if you've served in the military, you may have what it takes to get out and run a farm yourself.
KPBS reporter Megan Burks produced that piece. After starting in 2012, Primal Pastures now sells 20,000 chickens every year. Well, we may be looking at a gradual warm-up around here, from the beaches to the desert. Looking more like May gray along the coast over the next few days. Temperatures mostly in the upper 60s, as you can see. A little warmer, though, inland, with a mix of sun and clouds expected by the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine in the mountains. Temperatures there in the low to mid 70s. And we're headed towards the triple-digit mark for the desert later this week. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Tomorrow on Morning Edition, a debate on Capitol Hill may end up on San Diego airwaves, the group drumming up support against a sweeping trade bill that may change the rules for dozens of nations. And on Midday Edition tomorrow, the U.S. Supreme Court takes up a case that could give California's voting districts a big shakeup. That's at noon tomorrow on KPBS Radio. And of course, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.